Hello and welcome to ET Campus Stars. We are in our fifth edition, and our attempt is to arm students with information and knowledge so that they can make better decisions about their future. I'm Meloni Bhatt. Our focus today is to bring you all the information you need to study abroad. As we emerge from the pandemic, campuses worldwide have opened up, signaling new opportunities for students looking for an international experience. And I have with me experts whose organizations have shepherded millions of students in their journey to a foreign degree and are here to give you the most definitive and reliable information on a whole range of topics like new destinations for a foreign education, financing your foreign degree, post-study work permits, and much more. So let me start by introducing them. First, we have with us Mr. Naveen Chopra, who is the founder and chairman of TC Global, formerly known as the Chopras. TC Global is an education, learning, and investment services platform. Mr. Chopra, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, we have with us Mr. Piyush Kumar. He is the regional director, South Asia and Mauritius for IDP Education Limited, which specializes in international education services. IDP is a publicly listed company on the Australian Securities Exchange. Mr. Piyush Kumar, thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me, Milan.
Next, we have with us Mr. Ankur Dhawan, who is the president of UpGrad Abroad, which is the international education platform by higher education provider UpGrad. Mr. Ankur Dhawan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me.
And finally, we have with us Mr. Neeraj Saxena. He's the CEO of Auxilo Finserve Private Limited, which is a non-banking financial company that specializes in education loan services. Mr. Neeraj Saxena, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Meloni.
All right, so my first question is to all the panelists. All your businesses support students who want to study abroad. So my first question really is, A, how do you see the offtake of overseas education in the next year? And as per your business, what are the challenges and opportunities for Indian students when it comes to studying abroad, say this year or the next? So should we start with Mr. Naveen Chopra?
Okay, fair enough. Meloni, demand side, shortage there has never been. Even through the COVID times, demand, in actual fact, potential demand was exploding. It was a supply side issue. And now that the gates are opened up, the floodgates are really open. I mean, to the extent that, going back a few years, and we've been around since 1995. And there was a time when a lot of university classrooms were empty or half empty or whatever, and they were running around all over the world trying to fill them. And the Chinese largely filled a lot of that. And the Indian students filled a lot of that. They still had spaces. So you were able to, for many universities, right up to the last, you were able to pick up the phone and say, hey, look, I've got a student very interested, he'd like to come, he or she would like to come, and the university would say, yeah, sure. Let's look at this and take them. Now there's a situation that has reversed to a point where demand is so explosive that most universities, and then you can forget about the rankings in this, top ranked are in any case flooded with applications. Even the mid-ranked or the low-ranked so-called institutions are getting so much demand that they are now saying, just almost soon after the beginning of the recruitment or admission cycle, that look, we are filling up, or we filled up, or some classrooms are filled up. So it is, and across the board. We used to, when we started with Australia. We were the first organization to go global, in the sense that we went to the UK, we went into other countries, USA, Canada, so on and so forth. Almost every other country is now doing that. We counsel for almost 40 countries, so institutions across. Of course, the demand spread is thin across many of these countries, but that demand spread is certainly on a growth path. Because for Indian students, if you can stratify the market broadly, you divide it into the creamy layer, which is a very, very rich people, whose main objective is to give the best education that they can to their kids, and they will send them to the best possible college based upon their profile. And if they're able to peddle influence, they will try and do that. I don't know how many times I've been asked by really rich people and say, hey, look, I'm prepared to donate $1 million, get me a seat in University X, Y, or Z. So then you have the mid layer. I mean, in the creamy layer, I'll include the upper middle class also, where people with income levels of a couple of crores, for example, professionals who are trying to get the best education for their kids. The upper middle class, and that layer, they're one of their core aim is for India to send students into places where they can, at the very least, gain some experience in the country of choice, and many of them want to settle down in the country of their choice, or wherever they are going. So migration-driven immigration has been a huge aspect, which is why I have described this business out of India as a visa-driven business, which is also why, as a consequence of that visa-driven business, there is all the hanky-panky that has been there, and it has grown over the years. I mean, the shoddy practices have not reduced; they have grown. And many players have contributed to that. I call ourselves an exception because we absolutely refuse to do that, even if we lose business. So, in that sense, there is an explosive demand. And given the geopolitical situation and the situation within our own country, I mean, if you think about it, long before COVID, the economy of this country was going down because of various factors that we don't need to go into. And that itself was pushing and driving companies to go and domicile themselves overseas. Those who could, they have done that. A lot of companies have gone overseas, domiciled themselves there, and still carrying on business out here. And certainly students who were able to go work overseas. Now, I was just in Australia. I've come back after a month in Australia, which is an adopted home. I've been living there since '81. The demand shortage for skilled labor or semi-skilled labor or even unskilled labor is so huge that people are screaming, businesses are screaming. There are no waiters available. There are no shop assistants available. There are no fruit pickers available, vegetable pickers available. So, I mean, in that sense, there's a massive opportunity for our students to go and not only earn. I mean, I noticed that minimum wage in Australia is the highest in the world. I mean, it's the ballpark about $16, $17 is the minimum wage, hourly wage. And people who were on minimum wage at that level, I saw quite a few of them getting $30 an hour, $35 an hour.
Right. So there are opportunities for Indian. I'm not sure how many Indian students want to go there and pick fruit, but I'm sure a lot of Indians definitely want to migrate out. How do you see the offtake of overseas education in the next year and this year? And what are the challenges and opportunities for Indian students?
Thanks, Melanie. See, to your first question in terms of how do we see the offtake of overseas education, we are very bullish.
Right.
For example, this year, the kind of interest which we have seen, we have never ever witnessed in the past. The demand is so high that, as Mr. Chopra rightly said, it's the supply side which is struggling. If we look at, currently, as per the Ministry of External Affairs estimate, around 750,000 Indian students were studying abroad. And if you look at Red Sea report, which had come out some time back, it forecasts that the demand is going to grow to 1.8 million by 2024. But that's huge. And by all means, it looks like that India has surpassed China as far as sending new international students is concerned. So India currently has become the #1 market. So the demand is huge. It's a young country, as we all know. And we see that the demand is going to go through the roof, not only for next 1 to 2 years. I think that for the next 10 years, this industry is going to grow at a phenomenal pace.
All right. Okay. Mr. Neeraj Saxena, your view?
So Chopra and Piyush has actually taken care of the answer completely. So I think same with us. After pandemic, when things settled down, and last year was the first year when we saw that, there was a huge number of, offtake of Indian students going abroad. And actually, some of the financial institutions were actually not able to handle the load. That was a situation. Yeah. So I strongly feel the next, as Mr. Piyush said, that for the next 10 years also, I would say, dreams and aspirations drive this demand. And I think Indian students are very, very focused on, studying and improving the quality of life. And I think newer countries coming into a foray beyond US also has actually changed the landscape. So I think the demand and offtake of the Indian students will be actually growing at a very phenomenal rate in the next 5 years.
Right. Mr. Ankur Dhawan, do you concur?
Yeah, I completely concur. See, look at UpGrad Abroad. It's just a a very new entrant into the study abroad space, and motivated by Mr. Chopra and Piyush to build this business out of UpGrad, because we clearly see that there is a lot more demand to study abroad, which is currently not being fulfilled by the kind of courses which are available. And that's when we decided, okay, can we do something here? Can we create courses which further makes them affordable to study abroad? And since the beginning of this particular vertical which I've started, every quarter we have seen that our numbers are growing 3x. So that tells you that a very new entrant is able to grow 3x every quarter, means that there is so much of pent-up demand that despite having some of the largest player in this panel, TCG as well as IDP, a new entrant is able to find a space in this whole thing. So I completely concur with everybody here that there is a lot of demand, and the demand is going to further grow. In terms of challenges, I think one of the challenges which students have to prepare themselves for is that due to the high demand, there is a lesser seats available. So they need to pre-plan a lot to get a seat in a good quality of institution, as well as they have to pre-plan for their visa, because each embassy is right now burdened with so many of visa applications that they are not able to give visa. So there will be little more rejections. So everybody has to pre-plan. Otherwise, in a regular scenario, they could have gone a little late and still found a visa appointment and got a visa done. But in today's time, you have to really plan 6 months ahead that you have to get a slot in one of these embassies.
And we'll touch upon one or two of those points that you raised, Mr. Ankur Dhawan. Mr. Chopra, to you now. Does an Indian school education prepare kids for an education abroad? What are the advantages or disadvantages of an Indian school education?
I'm going to give you an answer that's going to be slightly long. You know, before I left India, back in 73, I used to curse Indian education. I used to say, oh, this is useless, it is rubbish, it is this, it is that. Over the years, I suddenly discovered when we came into the business and otherwise that Indian students were performing outstandingly well overseas, and they have been doing so for decades. All right, for 50 years. I've seen that myself. So I started to do a deep dive into this. I mean, I'm essentially a thinking person, and I started to, sort of deep dive into this, and I discovered that up to school level, our education has been described as rote education, right? That is all rote, and there's no critical thinking developed, and this and that, and blah, blah, blah. But actually, what is happening in that rote level education is that we are forcing our children through the academic pressure that we are putting on them to focus their minds, to learn to focus their minds. The reason that Indian students started to do as well as they did was that in the area of maths and sciences, which you can't possibly excel in unless you train your mind to focus. You cannot do well in maths unless you bring your, learn to focus your mind in maths. You just can't do it. So that training that we have forced down or force fed our children has stood them in fantastic stead. Even a person or a student, and I've seen countless cases, and by now we've sent, I don't know, millions, in a sense. I have seen students who in India were scoring 60%, 65%, 70% kind grades, and our people would say, oh, what is it, 85%? Oh, this is nothing, They have gone outside and they've done outstandingly well. I don't know a single person who has not, unless they've just gone into the party mode, which is usually the very rich crowd. Okay. So I think that Indian education as it has stood, of course, there's a lot of room for improvement, but the fundamental principle of force feeding, if you want to call it, students to focus their minds, I think is not something that we should drop. At the university level, unfortunately, there's a vast room for improvement. There is, in terms of primarily in 2 or 3 areas. One, that the curriculums in Indian universities is static. It's now started to change, but it is static. You will find universities have had a curriculum that's been going on for the last 20 years or more in many cases. Now it has started to change. So there is some movement there. The second aspect is in the teacher motivation. Our teachers are so lowly paid that, it's only a very highly motivated person who's got a social consciousness and says, yeah, I'm not interested in going and making money. I'm okay with this little bit of money that I'm getting. I'm able to live on subsistence. That the good teachers, of that caliber are there, and a few, and that's why the education system is being propped up. So, and then the third thing in my view is that the narrative which is somehow embedded in our society that education is is not for profit and it should be only as a social thing. Well, guys, if it is going to be a social thing, then better provide enough money for really paying your teachers well and providing the facilities. Infrastructure is not an issue. Infrastructure is a relatively lower issue. Anybody can spend some money and put up the infrastructure. It's the quality of the teacher, the passion of the teacher, that makes for a great college or a university.
Okay. In the application journey, Mr. Piyush Kumar, is there anything that can tip the balance for students, from your vantage point? Or what is it that can tip? Is it recommendation letters? Is it essays? Anything particularly students in India should bear in mind?
So, Melanie, there is no formula which, anyone can crack, right?
Okay.
Had it been so easy, I think a lot of people would have cracked that. So it's a combination of various factors. Absolutely, your academic performance, especially if you're going to, for example, if you're going to US, I mean, your academic performance right from maybe 9th standard onwards is very important. Similarly, a lot of these universities look at your overall personality, right? It's not only focused on what percentage of marks you have achieved, right? They obviously look at what kind of interest you have, if you are good in extracurricular activities, what kind of recommendations your teachers or professors are willing to give you, right? Similarly, a lot of these, especially in US and to some extent in Canada, etc., a lot of times it's the statement of purpose which you write, the essays which you write, right? And what kind of original thinking you have. So there are a lot of these stuff, and that is why getting into some of these elite institutions is not as easy as sitting in particular, say, an entrance exam and cracking it and just getting admission, right? So you really need to have a multi-dimensional personality, and you really need to excel in a lot of fields.
All right. Okay. Mr. Neeraj Saxena, to you now. One of the most important aspects of going abroad to study is to ensure that you have funds for education and that you are able to manage your finances, while you're there. So how important is financial counseling for parents and students, and what are the things that they must be aware of?
I think, Melanie, financial counseling is of utmost important, I would say. But before giving an answer towards that, I think the loan should be the last resort which parents and students should look at. So I think the first thing which they should look at is what kind of scholarships they can get. I think that's the primary first step which they should take. Then they should look at that how much they can fund from their own savings. And for the balance, if there is any balance, they should look for a loan, firstly, you have to understand that these students are most of them, which what I see are first-time loan borrowers. And most of them have almost no credit history as such. So for them to understand that, for example, a simple fact that moratorium is actually not an interest waiver. Moratorium is, just a gap where you're not paying. So the company is billing you, and eventually you'll have to pay that as the EMI. Your loan is going up. This is also not known, so what is the difference between a floating rate? What is the difference between a fixed rate? What is the outcome if you don't pay on time? So I think they are most of them are first-time borrowers, and so it's very essential that they have financial counseling. Also, the timing of the funding is very important. I think when they are going for counseling, whether IDP or research. So I think a lot of them, some universities actually ask financing proof before your funding proof before the admission, issuing the admission letter. Some universities give the admission letter and before the visa they require. So every country, every course has a specific need. So I think a lot of counseling happens by esteemed institutions which are present there in the panel. But yeah, then of course they need to understand the importance of financing and be prepared so that because there are a lot of things happening in their life at the point they're going. So, and this kind of uncertainty actually, they get into panic somehow, and then they borrow loans at whatever rate and whatever terms, which is available to them. So I think if they plan it beforehand, I think it can be much better. And I think counseling maybe post applying, and when you're waiting for admission letter, at that stage, the counseling happens, and they have sufficient time in their hand to actually manage their funds and plan it well.
Okay. Mr. Ankur Dhawan, there are international lenders who are now offering loans without collateral, without co-applicants. What should students keep in mind when they go for these options?
So these providers who are giving these options are very limited in terms of what they are willing to provide. So they only look at the elite universities, I think, which Piyush referred to in US specifically, maybe some in Canada. So you can't rely completely on these unless you're getting an offer letter from these institutions. So, but if you are allowed, I think these are very good options, because if you look at most of the time, people who don't get education loan are because they've crossed that age limit where the parents can become a co-applicant. The parents are retired and they're not able to find co-applicant. In this case, only the option which I see is to get these kind of loans where nobody's asking who is your guarantor. Your parents cannot become guarantor because they're already retired. So these are one of the best options which you can get, and you might not have a collateral to put. You don't even want to put a collateral many times. So in that case, these are ultimate very good options. And I think I'm working with many of them to figure out how to increase their university acceptance. How can they increase the programs they are accepting? From a student point of view, if they can get one of these loans, I think it makes sense for them to go. In terms of interest rate also, these are mostly affordable compared to the NBFCs which will be providing the loans in India. So in that sense, I think it's one of the best options. People should be aware about it, and hopefully more will be coming in this model.
Yeah, I actually have a question for Mr. Neeraj Saxena. The education loan portfolios of Indian banks has been shrinking over the last 2 odd years, perhaps because of the pandemic. Students and borrowers are defaulting on loans, due to pay cuts, job losses, which has also spooked the banks. In this backdrop, how easy or tough is it for students to get the loans and to repay them? Though, Mr. Saxena, I'm fully aware that you said that they should go for loans only after they have figured out how they can fund part of the education themselves.
Sure. So before answering the question, Maloney, I think on the previous question which you asked from Mr. Ankur. So I would say some of as he rightly said, that they have limited kind of, they only fund for approved universities, etc., etc. Yeah. That is a challenge. Also, if you see the pricing on the face, actually, if you see it looks attractive, but actually when you calculate, so it's not much different than what Indian lenders are offering, because they have a high origination fee, 5% plus kind of origination fee, and then 8.5%, 9%, and some of them charge even 11. So if you see compare the pricing with the current Indian lenders, I would say it's all ballpark, So coming to the next question which you asked me right now, that from in the Indian context, you have to understand one thing: the traditional banks in India are funding education loans as any other loan segment, and their understanding of education per se is not there, right? So the higher defaults which you're talking about are all sub 4 lakh loans. 80% of the defaults are in that sector where the job orientation is not there. Okay. And for private lenders like us or other companies who are existing in the landscape, we understand education very well. So we understand what kind of job orientation any course is giving, what kind of salaries the guy will earn. So we have a model where we focus on the future potential income of the student. So, for example, we right now for some courses in US, Canada, Ireland, even go up to 70, 75 like unsecured. So because we understand the potential of the course, we understand the placement potential. So traditional banks comparing it with the private lenders who specialize in education, I think is wrong. And if I may say so, I think in lending segments, education finance, if you do it well, is the best segment to be in with the lowest defaults, I would say. And there are many examples in the market. I am not going to name them, but you can check for yourself.
All right. Let's say, things go south for a student, and there is a time that comes when, they might have to have a conversation about restructuring the loan with the loan provider. At what point, what should they know about that, and when should they start that conversation?
So I would give a recent example. I think COVID was a major setback for many lenders as well. So and there was some students, some families who were getting stuck because of loss of job, or university education getting delayed, or job placement not happening for the student, right? So I think that is the time you have to talk to your lenders. Private lenders who specialize in education finance are empathetic. I would say they're not the traditional models where they will go for hardcore collection approach with you. and you should ask for any kind of repayment holiday, a restructuring option. And basis that, I think you can survive. In the last COVID, I think we helped a lot of students by restructuring their loans and giving them enough time to actually get a job and then start paying back. So I would not say it did not be impacting your credit history, because the system, Indian system is as such that any delay in payment or any restructuring will impact your credit history, but it's much better than defaulting actually, and you can actually justify it in the future.
Mr. Piyush, would you recommend that students, when they go to a foreign university, they work there? And do you think that helps with paying loans, whatever little?
Yes, I would certainly recommend that students, while studying, opt for part-time work in whichever countries they are. See, it's not only about repayment of loans, right? Working part-time also helps integrate them with the local community and understand the work culture.
A good point. Yes.
And as Mr. Chopra was saying that he was talking about the hourly rate in Australia, right, being one of the highest, $35 or something like that, right? So in Australia, currently, the government has relaxed the condition which was there earlier, that students can work 20 hours a week. That has been relaxed, right? Students can work to whatever hours they like. And similar kind of demand is currently very strongly being raised in the UK and Canada, etc. Because post-COVID, the inflation is very high. A lot of students obviously are finding it difficult to cope up. And hence there is a lot of demand being made that students be allowed to work for higher number of hours. So I definitely think that they should work, because working in the local community also prepares a student for their careers after completion of their course. And as part-time workers, while the students may not be able to make huge money, but they do make enough to pay for their expenses, at least living expenses overseas, and sustain a healthy lifestyle. So it's not only about, it's less to do with repaying loans. It's about ensuring that your own contribution to that funding, which a fellow panelist was mentioning, that also is taken care of.
Right. Mr. Ankur Dhawan, I wanted to speak to you about a gap year. Some students want to take a gap year before they go to a foreign university. Would you recommend that?
So if the gap year is for doing something which is productive, I think then it's always a welcome. So if you, let's say you're taking gap to do some vocational work, want to participate with some NGO and do some volunteering there, all those are very, very welcome things by any university who looks at your SOP or essay, say, okay, wow, you have done something beyond the education and academics. But if the gap year is not to do anything and get involved in household chores, or you're doing something which is not justifiable, then university will question that. Again, there's a limit to what you can do. If the gap year is in limit that 1, 2, 3 years, you'll be welcome. But if it is going beyond that, I think then there are questions around genuine temporary entrant, and different countries have different rules to accept the gap years. Like I know from Germany, they will accept any number of gap years, and Australia will be very, very strict when it comes to looking at your gap year. Canada might be in between somewhere. So each country. So I will still recommend, if you have a genuine reason to take a gap and you want to use it to build your profile, as mentioned by Piyush, if you're looking for an elite institution and you want to spend 1 year just doing volunteering with an NGO and put it on your resume, go for it.
Okay. Mr. Chopra, one of the big reasons why students want to study abroad are post-study work permits. They allow students the opportunity to build industry connections in the country where they've studied, and it also drives their careers. What is the scenario like when it comes to work permits and, because the pandemic is still raging, sporadically in some countries?
Okay, just on the previous point, I think that what you were talking about gap year is very much US focused. Other countries generally don't. I just thought I would enter that. Now, in my opening comments, if going back to what I had said, that there is a genuine skill shortage that has developed due to a variety of reasons, including some of the policies that the different countries have had to bring in because of voter angst against the I call them peach pink. I don't call them whites. The non-Anglo-Saxon, non-European migration. Okay, now we are visible in most of these countries and visible in large enough numbers. So there's a certain segment of the population that has reacted to that, which as a consequence of which the barriers were put up. In Australia, from memory, in the last 25 odd years, the barriers went up 3 times or maybe 4. And they were crashed down 3 times or as many times as they came, because it inevitably resulted in the scenario where the local skill shortage exploded.
Right.
The local population is not growing. Most European nations are experiencing a negative population growth. The economy, for the economy to grow, they have to have the skills across the board. I mean, in a place, from plumbers and electricians to engineers and IT professionals and healthcare workers. Again, in an aging population, healthcare has become a very major issue. So I foresee a long-term demand for professions, which is now forcing the countries to open their countries. And I mean, as Piyush has just mentioned, that in Australia the 20-hour work scenario is being decimated, and in other countries that is not because of student demand or demand of universities to open it for the students' benefit. It is because they need it.
It's an economic compulsion.
They need it. It is that, so now even in terms of migration opportunities, which are automatically leading into that area. I mean, the free trade agreement that has just recently been signed in with the UK is also pushing that narrative to come through. This pushing countries to start issuing temporary work visas, which will be 3, 4 years or 5 years or however, renewable, and then it will lead to migration opportunities based on a point system, which is what almost all countries have gone into, a point system. So it's I think there's a long-term, rewards are massive.
Okay, Mr. Piyush, I want to pick up on a point that Mr. Chopra made a little early. The last 2 years of the pandemic, many students have been studying for home. Now, there's been a shift in thinking that you need not really attend campus for an education or for a degree. How do you see this as impacting the canvas of studies abroad?
Well, our very interesting question, because when COVID had begun, this is what everyone thought, or this is what everybody was thinking, that, maybe the way the education is getting delivered is going to have a permanent shift. Still early days, but our experience so far has not been that. Okay. And I'll tell you why. During the COVID period, a lot of international institutions gave the option to the students to start online. And they said that, whenever, the situation is under control and you get visa and, my country is open, then you can come and join in.
Yeah.
Not everyone was enthused. People were very clear that for them, for Indian students typically, and I'm talking primarily about Indian students here, studying abroad is not only about going and getting education. It's about going to a new country, getting assimilated into the culture, trying to get exposure to new ways of doing things, a lot of times working there, and maybe even settling down.
That's a 360-degree experience.
Absolutely. So Indian students are much smarter. Their goals are very clear. But at the same time, there are a lot of programs where there is a lot of practical aspect to it. You need to go into labs. You need to do a lot of practical stuff. Those programs you cannot do online, right? Moreover, online, to my mind, is more suited for upskilling, reskilling, etc. and all. But if you ask anyone, given a chance, would they want to go and attend a university physically versus doing online, I can guarantee you 90% or more than 90% would want to go there physically and do it. And that is why the moment the borders have opened, you see the floodgate, right? So that is the reason, that's the proof that, students are very, very clear that international education means going to the university. You very proudly see them standing in front of the university and clicking the photographs and, sharing with people and all that stuff, right? So all that experience or exposure is not going to come via any online mode. So that is something which we need to keep in mind very, very clearly. And that's something which we hear from students very, very clearly.
I just wanted to add some, this question, Miloni, is the only question which I can answer confidently, because my business is blended learning. I know Mr. Chopra touched upon the digital education. Piyush might say 90%. So I play in that 10% student
territory. Yeah.
So I have more than 20 plus universities right now on blended model with me. And I agree with Piyush that anybody who can go today will like to go today. But then there is a large part of student population who cannot, who absolutely, taking example from what was mentioned earlier, that working professionals, now people who are working, so they don't have that luxury that they will quit job and suddenly start going abroad. They want a little more transition. That is where UpGrad has. We run programs of the universities where they can do 1 semester with us and then go on campus, or 2 semesters, then go on campus. And that's what I said, I am growing this volume 3x every quarter. So there is a demand. That 10% demand is also growing very fast. And that's where UpGrad and UpGrad Abroad feels that we are adding value. By teaching them before they go on campus. I think one question which was touched earlier, is the education, Indian education, really creating those students who can go successful? When it comes to STEM, I think Dr. Chopra said very well that, okay, Indians are excellent when it comes to STEM, but then we also touched about that lateral thinking and liberal arts and going beyond what is base stuff. That is where we lack. And that's where I, as a company, or UpGrad Abroad as a company, is trying to add those skills. When the student is preparing to go abroad, let's see where are they lacking, and those skills have to be added, the critical thinking or the other stuff. So that's what I will add. Yes, this market might be a little small for the time being, but this is growing very fast.
Ankur, why don't we continue with you? What has been the impact of the overseas education market with the war in Ukraine? Say especially in that region, and do you see this impact as being long-term and short-term? And if anyone else also wants to chip in after you, then they're all welcome to do so.
So, Miloni, as what I think we are sending a lot of students to Germany, and Germany was the most closer to, I think, Ukraine, and they would have, like, largest economy of Europe, should have been hit very badly. Students should not have gone there. All those questions were asked, but I don't see that happening at all. I think when COVID could not stop the demand to go abroad, I don't think this war is going to stop it. People still want to go. Specifically, the courses which were being done in these countries, maybe they will see some drop in coming 1 or 2 intakes. But as soon as this war is over, I think the things will go back and everybody will go abroad to complete their medical courses. Because I think we touched upon it, that there's a lack of quality of education and seats when it comes to medical education in India. So people have no option but to go outside and complete it. They can't afford it in India. They go abroad to get it done. So yeah, so it will go back to the normal. Yeah.
What are the destinations that are emerging?
I think UK, I think my panelists will completely agree with me that we were not seeing UK demand for quite some time. And in 2021, when they started coming up with their post-study work visa rules, is one of the countries which is seeing the most demand, bigger than the Canada. The Canada was supposed to be the best market when it comes to immigration, PR-friendly market. UK not being that PR friendly, still seeing a lot of students going there. I think it's a quality of education which you get in UK that's really a demand puller. The other thing is that it's a 1-year course, much affordable compared to what you can do in Canada. So UK is a pretty strong emerging market. Over to you, Piyush. I think you want to add something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that these are very interesting times. I mean, it has never ever happened that all the major destination countries like the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, etc., are simultaneously competing to get international students. Every time, either one or the other market has been down because of government policies, etc., and all, right? So there was a time when Australia was going great guns. Then Australia market completely collapsed for Indian students, but UK was doing fine. But then UK withdrew the work permit. UK market went down. US was doing fine. Post President Trump, US went down, Canada started. This is the only time when every single of those major destinations are currently, encouraging international students to come in and competing with each other with very liberal policies, right? So these are I would say this is the golden period for international education. The students are spoiled for choices.
All right.
And sorry, Melanie, on a lighter note, when Ankur was mentioning about when we're talking about the online piece, we had students telling us during COVID time that, typically I'm going to pay more or less the similar fee, right? So even I have to do online, let me go to the country I'm willing to go do online course from there, not studying in India and from my home. So send me to Canada, send me to Australia. I'm willing to start online, but not from my home because I'm paying the same money.
But all the questions or the countries that have been mentioned are mainline countries for many years. I mean, of course, the traditional ones have been the UK and the US. US always has been at the forefront, and it still is the country of choice in that respect. But I think during all of these shifts that have been happening and cross shifts that have been happening, there are significant student flows to France, to Italy, to Netherlands, to Portugal. I mean, as the Indian students are looking at their options and sometimes choosing destinations that under normal circumstances, counselors, consultants are not thinking of. Because there are very, very good universities splattered across the globe. I mean, even, for example, medical education in Caribbean, people set up medical colleges, and there's a flow of students there, because from there they can jump off to the United States, do the USMLE and stuff like that, and your doors are open. So the choice matrix has expanded.
There is this other issue of navigating hate crime, the issues of racism. What is the kind of support that a student can expect from outfits and organizations such as yours?
So, what we do is before students, fly off to their destination, for every student, we hold pre-departure sessions where we take them through, what can they expect when they arrive in a new country, what are some of the do's and don'ts, etc. That is something which we do. Apart from that, and I'm primarily speaking about my organization, so we have offices in all the countries where we send students to. We have local offices there. And during these pre-departure sessions, we actually hand over these students to our local offices. So we have, our local offices, say in US, in Canada, in UK, etc., who actually connect with these students during those sessions. And we give them all the contact details, who are the people to contact just in case, they want to reach out, etc. So we completely, tell the students very clearly that even in the new country, you have IDP offices, and for any help, any support, you just need to, walk into our offices, local offices there, and we'll do our best to provide you whatever support, is needed.
All right. Okay. My last questions to Mr. Ankur Dhawan and Mr. Neeraj Saxena. What are the new trends, according to you, that are emerging when it comes to Indian students seeking a foreign education?
Yeah, so I will say I have created a new trend that students start studying online and then go on campus. So yeah, that is one very clear. Second, I think is that in terms of students now, they as something mentioned, that they understand the ROI of studying abroad. I think earlier there were a lot of thought around that. Okay, if you are going to study abroad, it is very, very costly. I think this was very big misconception. Even today, parents call me and they say, okay, I need to have 3 crore, 4 crore in my bank. Only then I can send my student to do bachelor's in US, my son to do, which is not accurate. But there are many other institutions available which are very affordable. So I think that the awareness has increased. A lot of people are understanding, and that's why that the boom we are seeing in study abroad is happening.
All right. Mr. Neeraj Saxena?
Just to add on to Ankur, I think one change which I have seen over the last 10 years being in this segment is that what my perception before entering into this industry was that abroad studies are for rich people, right? So last 10 years, I am seeing that rich financial access has enabled even the low income segment and low middle income segments to actually send their students to abroad. So we get loan applications where the family income is 20,000 rupees for a month, for example, and we have funded those students with 50 lakh, 60 lakh rupees unsecured on the potential of the student. Firstly, new trend is that now that myth and the perception in Indian minds, what was in our generation, has gone away. Now even a small-time employee in a company or a government job or police, all those people are actually aspiring to send their kids abroad, and one of the major reasons they're able to do that is the financial access through banks and non-banking companies, right, like us. Second, I would say that US dominance, I would say, should go away in the next 10 years. I would say US is a major dominant country when we speak about Indian students. Majority of them going there, especially in STEM courses. I think other countries like Piyush mentioned and Mr. Chopra also mentioned, UK coming up very well now. Australia being there, Germany coming up, Ireland, even newer countries, Poland, Singapore, etc. I think US dominance is actually going to go down. I would not say it will disappear. It will be one of the most dominant countries. Other countries will come up the curve.
Right.
And third, I would say as a last point would be that earlier again coming from the background of how we have come up the curve with studying, the STEM and management being the key is going to continue for some time, but the new age courses are coming up, and I see a lot of students going for courses in genetics, biomedical, cybersecurity, analytics, data science. So I think other courses are also coming into foray, and I think these courses will grow as we go ahead. Though of course, I would not deny that STEM is the most dominant stream for now and will continue for some time.
Right. And, on that note, it's time for us to say goodbye. So thank you very much, Mr. Naveen Chopra, Mr. Piyush Kumar, Mr. Ankur Dhawan, and Mr. Neeraj Saxena for this wonderful conversation. I really hope there are some great takeaways here for students. And I hope that, they're able to really power their dream for a foreign education. Thank you so very much, all of you, for your time and for your expertise today.
Thank you, Malini, and thank you to all the fellow co-panelists. Thank you.